The house on Maple Street looked like every other home in the neighborhood. White siding, trimmed hedges, a neat porch with two rocking chairs that rarely moved. To anyone passing by, it was the picture of a quiet American family life. But inside, behind the carefully polished doors and the drawn curtains, something had been unraveling for years. Ethan Carter had always believed his parents were strict, but fair. His father, Richard Carter, was a respected businessman in town, known for his discipline and sharp mind. His mother, Linda Carter, carried herself with elegance and control, always speaking softly but with a tone that left no room for argument. They valued order, perfection, and above all, obedience. As a child, Ethan never questioned it. But as he grew older, the cracks began to show. It started with small things. Punishments that didn't quite match the mistakes. Silence where there should have been comfort. Rules that seemed to shift depending on his parents' moods. At first, Ethan blamed himself. Maybe he wasn't trying hard enough. Maybe he was the problem. By the time he turned 16, the weight of that belief had started to crush him. One evening, Ethan sat at his desk, staring at his reflection in the darkened laptop screen. His room was spotless. His father made sure of that, but it felt suffocating. Every object seemed to remind him of expectations he could never fully meet. Downstairs, he could hear his parents talking. Their voices were low, tense. He wasn't supposed to listen. But something about the tone pulled him closer. He crept to the top of the stairs, careful to avoid the one step that creaked. "We can't keep this up forever," Linda was saying. Richard's voice was sharper. "We don't have a choice. If he talks, he's a child, Richard." "He's not a child anymore." Ethan froze. A cold knot formed in his stomach. They weren't talking about chores or grades. This was different. There was fear in their voices. Real fear. He leaned in closer. "We've controlled everything so far," Richard continued. "His friends, his school, what he sees, what he believes. But if he starts asking questions." "He already is," Linda said quietly. Silence followed. Ethan felt his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Controlled everything. What did that mean? Suddenly, a floorboard beneath him creaked. The conversation downstairs stopped instantly. "Did you hear that?" Linda whispered. Ethan's breath caught. Footsteps approached the stairs. He rushed back to his room, closing the door just as his father's shadow appeared in the hallway. Ethan jumped onto his bed, grabbing a book and pretending to read. A knock came. "Ethan." Richard's voice was calm now. Too calm. "Yeah," Ethan replied, trying to steady his voice. The door opened slowly. Richard stepped inside, his eyes scanning the room with unsettling precision. "Everything all right?" he asked. "Yeah. Just reading." Richard nodded, but his gaze lingered. "For how long?" Ethan hesitated for a fraction of a second. "About 20 minutes. Richard smiled faintly. "Good. Keep it up." He turned and left, closing the door behind him. Ethan didn't move for a long time. Something was wrong. That night, sleep didn't come easily. His mind replayed the conversation over and over again. Controlled everything. If he talks. Talks about what? The next day at school, Ethan found himself watching everyone differently. His classmates laughed, complained about homework, talked about weekend plans. Everything seemed normal. Too normal. He realized something unsettling. He didn't really have friends. There were people he spoke to, sure. But no one he trusted. No one he confided in. Every interaction felt surface level, like he was following a script someone else had written. Had his parents done that? The thought sent a chill through him. At lunch, a girl named Sarah sat across from him. She was new, recently transferred, and didn't seem to know about Ethan's quiet reputation. "You always sit alone?" she asked. Ethan shrugged. "I guess. That's kind of sad," she said bluntly. He almost smiled. "Yeah, maybe." She studied him for a moment. "You don't talk much, do you?" "Not really." "Why?" Ethan hesitated. No one had ever asked him that before. "I don't know," he said finally. Sarah leaned back in her chair. "Well, you should. People might surprise you." Her words lingered with him long after lunch ended. That afternoon, Ethan made a decision. He would start paying attention. Not just to what his parents said, but to what they did. Over the next few days, he noticed patterns he had never seen before. His phone, for instance, was always fully charged in the morning, even when he forgot to plug it in. His messages sometimes appeared read before he had opened them. Certain websites were blocked without explanation. One evening, he left his room quietly and checked his parents' study. The door was locked. It had never been locked before. Ethan's suspicion grew. A week later, an opportunity came. Richard and Linda had to attend a formal dinner event. They left the house at precisely 7 p.m., as they always did, dressed immaculately. "Be in bed by 10, Linda reminded him. "I will," Ethan said. As soon as their car disappeared down the street, Ethan moved. He went straight to the study. The door was still locked, but this time, he was prepared. Earlier that week, he had taken a small piece of molding clay and pressed it against the keyhole while his parents were out. It had been a risk, but it worked. Using that impression, he had managed to create a crude duplicate key. His hands trembled as he inserted it into the lock. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, click. The door opened. Ethan stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, the air heavy with the scent of leather and old paper. Everything was meticulously arranged. Too meticulously. He began to search. Drawers, cabinets, shelves. Most of it was ordinary. Documents, business files, financial records. Then he found the hidden compartment. It was subtle, almost invisible, built into the back of a drawer. If Ethan hadn't been looking closely, he would have missed it. Inside was a single folder. He opened it. His heart dropped. Photographs. Of him. Not normal family photos. These were different. Taken from a distance. At school. In public places. Some even from inside his own room. There were notes attached. Detailed observations. Times. Behaviors. Conversations. Ethan's hands shook as he flipped through them. This wasn't parenting. This was surveillance. A sound behind him made him freeze. The front door. They were back. Panic surged through him. He shoved the folder back into the compartment, closed the drawer, and rushed out of the study, locking it behind him just as footsteps echoed in the hallway. "Ethan," Linda called. I'm in my room, he replied, forcing his voice to sound normal. His pulse raced as he sat on his bed, trying to steady his breathing. They knew. Or at least, they would soon. That night, everything changed. At dinner, his parents were quieter than usual. They exchanged glances when they thought he wasn't looking. Ethan felt it. The shift. They were watching him more closely now. Later, as he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, a realization settled over him. He couldn't ignore this anymore. Whatever his parents were hiding, it involved him. And now, he knew too much. The next morning, Ethan did something he had never done before. He told someone. At school, he found Sarah and asked if they could talk. They sat under a tree at the edge of campus, away from the noise of other students. I think my parents are watching me, he said. Sarah frowned. Like normal strict parents. No, Ethan said, shaking his head. Not like that. I found something. Files. Photos. Notes. She studied his face carefully. You're serious? Yeah. Okay. She said slowly. Then we need proof. Ethan blinked. What? If what you're saying is true, you can't just confront them. You need evidence. Something real. Her calmness surprised him. You believe me? He asked. Sarah shrugged. You don't seem like someone who makes things up. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt something unfamiliar. Support. Over the next few days, they made a plan. Ethan would gather evidence. Sarah would help him figure out what to do with it. But they had to be careful. Because if his parents realized what he was doing, there was no telling what they might do. The tension in the Carter house grew thicker with each passing day. Richard and Linda sensed the change in their son. The subtle shifts. The hesitation in his voice. The way he looked at them. Not with obedience, but with suspicion. They knew. He was starting to see. And that was dangerous. One evening, Richard stood by the window, watching Ethan in the backyard. He's slipping, he said quietly. Linda stood behind him, arms crossed. We can still fix this. Or we can end it, Richard replied. She didn't respond. Because deep down, she knew what he meant. And that possibility terrified her. Meanwhile, Ethan prepared. He knew time was running out. The next step would either expose the truth or destroy everything. And somewhere in that house, beneath the calm exterior and the carefully constructed lies, two parents were beginning to realize something they had never truly considered before. They were losing control. And for the first time, they were afraid of their own son. Because he wasn't just watching anymore. He was fighting back. And this time, they had been caught.